Success is who you are, not what you have or what titles you might have. It's not giving people outside myself the power to define who I am. I wish that I had understood that the only person that matters in that conversation is me. You don't find success and you don't fulfill your life by sitting waiting for somebody else to hand it to you. That it's about doing all you can to support yourself. Trust the journey. If you trust it, you will enjoy it. You're not in this alone.
Welcome to the Richer Soul Podcast, where we share how to live in harmony across health, wealth, time, relationships, and spirituality. How do you bring them all together to live your ultimate life? The best thing is we've got nothing to sell, just great advice from people who've succeeded and lived that dream. Welcome to Richer Soul, Susanne Eden. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to talking with you.
And I'm excited to learn from you today as well. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Well, I have a strain of Scots blood in me, and they are notoriously frugal. And so I am that. Now, when I was a child, we had very little money. My father was an alcoholic, and we had a very rough time. He was an amazing man, probably one of the smartest people I've ever known. But that's his story to tell, not mine. But it was very difficult. And I got my first job when I was 11. I was working in a little grocery store. I lied about my age and told them I was 15. I don't think that they believed me, but they gave me the job anyway. I didn't like it too much. So then I went on to, in my old days, when I was a child, which is a long time ago, they had ushers at the show. I don't know, you're too young to remember that, but I got a job doing that, and I made $11 when I worked Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday afternoon. And I knew what that $11 could buy. And I knew how many $11 it would take to get tickets to come down. I lived north of Toronto, in a small village, and I knew how many of those $11 it would take to get tickets for the opera when I was 15. So that's how I learned about money. And my mother, when I look at it now, I grew up in a time when you never knew who was going to drop in. Nowadays, you have to have a formal invitation. Even kids, well, we have to have a play date. It's stupid to me because it defies logic. But in my time, you never knew who would be. And we had certain friends, it was a joke in the family, who always managed to drop in just before mealtime. And my mother could feed an extra 2, 4, 6 people, whatever, on nothing. I don't know how she ever did it, but we always had gardens, and she knew how to stretch things. And so I still have that. I'm very bad about money. I'm very fortunate now that I don't worry. I'm not going to live under a bridge any day soon, but I don't pay attention to money like I should. Not that I waste it, but it's not my driving force. With my book, it's a good example. I mean, it's not a book that everybody's going to buy. It's a book that people who are open and want to change their lives and want to make of that last phase of life a testament, a legacy, if you will, when they go, they will get a lot from the book. So, I don't do things for money. When I used to do a lot of public speaking and traveling around the country, I've been all over Canada, every corner of Canada, north, south, and everywhere. I half the time never asked them what they were paying. I would just be interested in what they were trying to do and how I could help out. So that really does come from family. I think the values you have dictate what you think about money.
It does. A lot comes from family. Very rarely does school teach about money. Still
Nothing.
To this day.
No, nothing. No.
Out of curiosity, is that frugality still a trait, not with you, but that you see in society or in that culture?
No, not at all. I don't know how children today have any concept of money. When you just go to the store and hand over a piece of plastic, I did my doctoral studies. I'm in a doctor of education, not of medicine. I always like to make that clear. And I did my doctoral studies on children's play and learning. And I spent a whole year doing a qualitative study. That is, I was a play partner in a kindergarten classroom every day from September till April. And I always remember when they would play, they love to play store. And that's a universal theme all over. Stores are different places, but the idea of going to a store. And even then, and that's back in the 80s, I remember them going and they would take a piece of paper and make like a little credit card. And they would go and hand that piece of paper. It was very rare that we had toy money and stuff, but even then, they didn't really know what to do with that. But they knew what to do with this card.
It's funny, when my kids were growing up, we gave them allowance every week.
Yes.
And we gave them allowance to teach them about money. And we gave them dollar bills. And so they always understood the value of the paper. And the thing with dollar bills is, well, you talked about the $11. After 10 weeks of $11, you got to stack this thick, right? So it feels real.
Yeah.
And you can see it grow, and you start to learn different denominations. When it gets too thick in the envelope, you're like, hey, can I have a 20?
Yeah.
Can I have 100? And they start to understand the value of money. And I don't think most people do that. Tap, swipe, there's no emotional connection to it.
The thing that I find interesting, even now for me at this advanced stage, I just paid a very heavy grocery bill recently, and it doesn't feel real. I'm on a pension. When I started teaching, first year I taught, 1961, I made $11,000 for the year. Okay, so whatever that worked out to. And we got that check every 2 weeks for whatever the amount was. And then we went to the bank and we got the physical money from that. So when you went to the store, you paid whatever. And so the pile went down. The pile might have started like that, but as you spent it, I really find it's a fascinating topic. We could spend the whole time just talking about that because it is a really interesting topic. And I think that's partly why we've come to a place in society where children don't accept having the hand-me-downs of somebody else. I listen to my younger friends who still have fairly young children, and even very young age, they know what the brands are that are hot. And that there's something wrong with that picture.
I don't disagree with you. You're reminding me back. I grew up with Montessori.
Okay.
And our family also was involved in teaching Montessori.
Okay.
And so even in Montessori, when you count, they actually have the physical items. You start to see the difference between a 1 and a 10 and 100 and 1,000. You physically see it, feel it, can learn how to count it. Yeah. And so numbers become real.
Yeah.
And I guess I don't know what they're teaching kids these days. We taught our kids that way. And so I think that was kind of a big differential.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you've kind of alluded to it, but I think people should know, unless they're watching, even if they're watching on YouTube, they couldn't even guess. How old are you? And now the age, we're not supposed to ask this question of women, but I asked ahead of time for permission.
Well, as I said to you earlier, we go through these phases where we don't want anybody to know how old we are. We lie about our age and we snip off a few years as we head towards 40. I'm at a stage now where I'm very proud to say I've turned 80. And I'm not without some physical issues. And they're affecting my mobility, which is a concern. But I think my mind is as sharp and as clear as it's ever been. I'm certainly writing as well as I've ever written. Now, that's not to say that I might draw a blank at some point in this interview and say, well, who am I and where am I going? But I'll try not to do that on you, Rocky.
And so one of the things that I talk about more so these days is longevity. But for me, longevity is about lifespan, which means that at 87, I do have a fully functional mind, that I can live on my own. I'm not in some sort of care. I know you mentioned Italy last year. Like, these are the types of things that we should still be able to do and be functional. But it takes intention to get to that point in the way that we live our lives.
Well, I think that for me, part of it is being a lifelong learner. I've written different blogs about that. I've done articles about it. I don't think anything has served me better throughout my life than my thirst to learn. And I can remember my career started in school board. I didn't have very many years where they let me loose with the children. I ended up in administration, but I always kept protected time to spend in the company of children in the classroom. So I would never lose touch with the reality of what teachers faced and what children faced when they sat there for a whole day. Life, I can remember very clearly, I had the choice of a significant advancement in administration at the same time that I was offered a tenure stream position at York University in Toronto. And I would take a huge cut in salary if I went to the university. People don't think that, they think, oh, that's where you're going to make the money. No, it's not, especially as governments cut education to the bone. And I came home and talked to my husband, and, he said, do we need more money? Well, no, we're living comfortably. We're not wealthy, but we don't need wealth. We have sufficient for everything we want to do. And so I went off to the university and finished my last 10 years of my career teaching at the university because I wanted to continue to learn. And I still do now in doing these things. I used to do a lot of public speaking at one time. I was all over Canada doing opening conferences and doing workshops and stuff. But that's a long time ago. I've been retired nearly 30 years. Yeah. So, and that was very much one of my questions. I open each chapter of my book with a quote and was kind of a key thought. And one of them is, statistically, we can now, barring a traumatic event, we can live to be 100. So if you retire as I did at 60, 40 years, what are you going to do with that? You're going to sit there and go downhill every day a little bit further, or are you going to... My very first blog was called Metamorphosis, Over the Hill or Flying High. And that's your choice.
It is. It's funny. There was just an article that came out in the Wall Street Journal that popped up on my feed. It's called The Retirement Crisis No One Warns You About Mattering. It says everyone worries about their future wealth and health, but very few people talk about how to continue to feel seen and valued in the world as you retire.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about continuing to be seen, continuing to grow, continuing to matter. And I think the key is exactly what you said. Lifelong learning is what keeps people sharp. I look at somebody like Warren Buffett,
yeah,
or Charlie Munger. They're constantly learning. They're running businesses. I see that people who are actively engaged seem so vibrant in their elderly age, and those that aren't, don't. And so I think it's a big part of it.
I never used to understand this business of choice. And people will say to me, oh, yeah, but I don't have any choice because I've got multiple sclerosis, or I have Parkinson's, or I have something. So therefore, I'm finished. No, you're not. And I love that movie that they did on, what's it? Now you see, I told you my mind would desert me at some point. The famous scientist who was so disabled and ended up right through, till his last days making
Was
a
that
big
Hawkins?
Yeah, Hawkins, yeah. We can have disabilities. I told you the story about my father when he was in his last days and the difference he made. Now it was just to the few men that he contacted within the hospital setting he was in, but he changed their lives and he was dying and there was nothing left of his body at that point. So it is in the mind. And I believe illness, our physical illness, is a manifestation of things going wrong in the mind. And I'm not talking about mental illness in the, the common sense, but the way we think and the thoughts that we allow to invade our life constantly, the monkey chatter that goes on,
We're going to get to that. And I will tell you, it amazes me how many elderly people all have this attitude of, I'm ready to go. How much longer? I'm ready. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you.
No.
It doesn't sound like you're living life to the fullest. So we're actually here to talk about your book. What inspired you to write the book, Healing from the Inside, Living Fully as You Age?
Well, it's my own story. And the reason that I didn't write it to show myself off or anything like that, that was not ever part of it. I went through so much trying to find a way to make my life have meaning, to feel better. I started with trying to feel better physically. And I was, I don't think it's any different now, but certainly my generation, we brought up to believe that the doctor knew everything and whatever the doctor said, you did. And truly, the Marcus Welby, if you're old enough to remember who Marcus Welby is, this benevolent, wonderful person who had all the answers. And I found that that was a absolute myth. And especially as we've come into this time in our lives where everything now is pharmaceuticals. You don't go to a doctor and they do anything much beyond, well, here's a medication that may help that. There are some doctors who are holistic and will look at other aspects of your life, but pharmaceuticals have taken over a huge chunk of medical care.
Was that always the way it was?
No, because there weren't the things available. I mean, simply as that. I talk about that a bit in the chapter on reimagining health. And I look back to my mother was a wizard, and I told you we had no money when I was growing up. But she had all these things that she used that I still, some of them use today, practices and stuff, and herbs from the garden. She always grew all those herbs. She didn't understand some of it, but she knew what worked and what didn't. And that came through the lineage of her grandmother and her mother and herself. And it has come to me. So I think that A, there wasn't the money, and B, or there wasn't the stuff. And then if there was stuff, there was no health care. So people like my parents who had no money, you had to find some other way of doing it. So, but I think now there is just so much. And I know you said you take a lot of supplements. I think the supplements are as damaging in some cases as the pharmaceuticals. And for me, I will just tell you this, that prednisone was what nearly killed me. And I was put on prednisone shortly after I was diagnosed with diabetes. Nobody told me there was a connection. Now I know, and it's well known and accepted, that it's the worst drug a diabetic can take. It literally destroyed my liver, my kidneys, and I've had such a battle getting all of that back. That's why, as I was telling you, I had this amazing A1C this past appointment, and it's stunning to the doctors even that can happen.
Well, because they don't understand the power of food, and they don't understand the rest of it. And it's funny, when my dad was in the hospital post I think it might have been his open heart surgery, each of the doctors was doing their own thing. And so he had a little bit of diabetes. He's always had asthma. And then he's there for the cardiac. And so he's on prednisone for his asthma. But the endocrinologist is screaming because it's messing with the diabetes. They're like, well, you're not eating properly. And he's like, that's because you give me crap hospital food.
Yeah.
Right. And so I had to stop them all from fighting. And literally, they put him on insulin. I'm like, why is he on insulin? This is absurd. He just has type 2 diabetes. Literally, I think within a week and a half or 2 weeks of being home, no insulin, barely any diabetes med, everything working out because he's eating real food, not the crap they serve. He's not stuck in a bed. He's not feeling worthless, being locked up, and it works out. But it just amazes me that they can't understand this. And yet, to this day, I don't think it's gotten better. I think it's gotten 3 times worse.
Well, I have a very close friend whose husband died 2 years ago, and he was being treated for cancer. But he'd also, and it wasn't aware that he had severe kidney damage and he had a heart attack. And at one point, the cardiologist recommended a medication. And fortunately, my friend was very proactive. And before she would let him take that, she contacted the nephrologist, the kidney doctor. And he said, "Oh my God, if he'd have taken that, he'd be dead tomorrow." But if he didn't have somebody doing that. So I think we're still a long way from really understanding the interconnectedness of, first of all the systems within the body. I say someplace in there, we're treated like we're a machine or like a car, and the mechanic can haul out this part and stick something in and off you go. We're not that. The more research that's going into this communication among the systems of the body, and it isn't just that, it's the communication then of us with the other living organisms. And I'm really into the studies that are going on about the communication among trees. The underground communication within the forest. It's fascinating to me. And you think of our bodies and how each part is there to support the rest of them. And if one is damaged, it will affect all of the systems. I can remember asking a nephrologist that I had to see. I had a urinary tract infection, and I asked him, could he give me a prescription? And he said, "No, you'll have to go to the urologist." I said, "Aren't they connected? You went to school all those years and you can't give me a prescription just for a simple infection." I mean, that's how much sense it makes.
No, and you do have to learn for yourself and figure it out and challenge and question. One of the things that you talked about early in the book, though, was clearing trauma and healing old beliefs. Can you share a little bit on that and shed a little light on that subject?
Well, that's the heart of it, isn't it? And it wasn't for me. I went from this, what I call it 3 stages, but I went from this healing from the outside, where I go to the doctor and he gives me 3 prescriptions for this and that and the other thing. And then this one doesn't work, so he gives me something, and then that one doesn't. So you go through all this crazy merry-go-round of one medication and another and what they're all doing to each other. And I got really fed up with that, and nothing was helping me. I was on prednisone for 12 years, if you can imagine. And it had affected my mind to the point where if you would ask me my name, this is 30 years ago, if you would ask me my name, I could hardly tell you. I had such brain fog. And now I'm writing, I'm doing blogs, I'm doing all kinds of stuff 30 years later. But it wasn't till I said enough of this, and I started then into the second phase that I call taking ownership, where I decided it wasn't up to the doctors, it wasn't up to the pharmacist, it was up to me. And I know my body better than they do. And I know what habits I have that aren't supporting my health. And I either make the choice to do something about that, and that can be in really as basically as I say, food, exercise, and breath work, and changing the mind. There's four kind of pillars, if you want, for that. And until we take ownership and say, okay, what can I do for myself? How can I get all of these pieces together to support my body's ability to heal itself? Then we just give up. And it is a choice. It really is a choice we make. We can either say, well, I'll just sit here and do this. Someone just the other week said to me, I was hobbling because I'm having a lot of trouble with spinal stenosis and stuff. And I was really sore. And she said to me, you've got to do something about that. And I said, well, I did check with the specialists, and they want me to go back on prednisone and take shots of cortisone in my spine. And I don't choose to do that. And she says, why not? You're old, it's not, what's the matter? Why wouldn't you do what you can to get out of pain? Well, physical pain isn't as bad as spiritual pain and mental pain. And by spiritual pain, I mean those things you talked about, believing that you still have a purpose, love, all of those the best of who we are is to me the spirit. And I think when that is damaged, now, so if to get back to your question, so as children, we may not be in a situation where we're physically abused or sexually abused or something, but we can be in a home where there's a great deal of verbal abuse, psychological abuse, different types of stress on us as very young children, and we learn coping mechanisms. And I talk about my own personal experience of that and how the coping mechanisms that I developed, and I'm talking young, like preschool age, where I could hide myself away psychologically. I learned how to do that to protect myself from trauma that was going on in our home, and how that continued to shape a great deal of what I did and what I became as an adult. So that's where I had the idea, or I developed the idea of a transformational journal. I used writing to help me go inside. And I talk about writing in the transformational journal as writing for understanding, not for communication. And I think there's a big difference. And we think of journals as a carryover from our old high school days, where everything would be marked with a red pencil. No, it's not that. It's about finding, and you do uncover stuff that you don't even know you're carrying. And I believe that in many respects is the genesis of much of our physical illness. It's manifested physically.
Was there a point, or was there something that caused you to go back and look at those childhood beliefs, or was it just awareness?
I believe that I was guided to do that. I do have this story in my book, but I went to a presentation by an energy healing doctor. He was a legitimate doctor, but he was doing a lot of energy healing stuff. And he had a theme that night of birth and the sort of what we start off with before we're even born and how that affects things. So I was very interested. I was sitting there listening. And then when I came home, I got out my journal and I started to write my story. I mean, what I'm told is that I was a very teeny baby. I wasn't quite 4 pounds. And in those days, 87 years ago, that was pretty serious, right? And I thought about how determined this little scrap of humanity must have been to survive what I survived. Then looking at and so it began there. And as I began to dig further and further and go back into my memories, I understood the effects, for example, of my father's drinking, what it had on me. Now, I was very fortunate that my father stopped drinking when I was in my teens. So that's another whole story. But in my early childhood is when he was at his worst with drinking, and how that affected me, how I loved him dearly. He was a wonderful father in so many ways, but he could turn from being the most wonderful father in the world to a monster when he was drinking. But I had never processed that until I was in and some of the other things I don't choose to share, but there were other things that happened that I really, we bury them. We don't want to think about that stuff. It's too painful. And I just said in one of the articles I just wrote this week that facing those long buried memories of the experiences that cause us to have negative energies that are stored within is a soul searing experience. It's hard. But boy, I used to read a lot of different things about energy healing and releasing these energies, and I never could figure out, because nobody ever tells you how you do that. They just tell you should. And so what I came to realize is that they release themselves. Once you put a name on that hurt and you bring it out and look at it, it has no more control over you. And that's guided from within. I am positive of that. I think we have somehow the capacity to find a path And no two paths are the same. My book is not a recipe. It's a support for people who want to make of their last journey, the last stage of life, something really, really important and meaningful.
And that's the key. It's not surprising that you didn't see it till much later in life. I think a lot of times we probably have to slow down and create the space
Of course.
for those conversations to occur.
And
Otherwise, they don't necessarily occur.
that's where reflection and meditation comes in. It's taking time every day to say, world's not going to fall apart if I take a half an hour or 3/4 of an hour to just be still. Some days for me, that's just breathing, breath work, very consciously breathing through my system, bringing the energies through my system. Other times it'll take a phrase or something I've either written or read or has occurred to me, and I will spend that whole time investigating what is that meaning to me? How can that change my life? Why am I not doing whatever, right? I think that self-inquiry, nobody talks enough about that, and that's where you know who you really are and who you ought to be. I always say, why was I given this package of talents and gifts and experiences, and you were given a very different package, and the next guy over is given another package. We all have a whole different package, an individual package that makes us who we are. And what are we supposed to do with them? And have we spent our lives doing it? Most of us have to say no, especially in such a materialistic society where you are judged by what you have rather than who you are. If you've got the latest Tesla in your driveway, oh boy, you've made it.
It's funny because my wife and I volunteer on a lot of charity boards, and we were at a meeting recently. And again, you have to realize the people who give to charity generally tend to be older.
Yeah.
And one of the conversations was about older people and how they just lose their filter. They stop giving a damn.
But you see, I lost mine very early on. I'm very bad.
I'm with you on that too. It gets me in trouble from time to time. And I'm like, you know what? I guess I'm okay with it. And I think I've come to learn that when people react to what you've said or done, it's not what you said or did. It's something inside of them has created that reaction. And more often than not, they're unaware of it.
Yeah.
And honestly, that makes me think if I look at social media today, I can see by the way people are reacting that they got a whole lot of problems.
Well,
and you can tell because of the way they behave.
I believe that social media is anything but social. I think it is highly egotistical. And you look at what people post in the selfies and the crazy nonsense. And, if you're traveling at all, you see people who spend all their time taking a picture of themselves. They don't look around and see what's there. I had a marvelous trip to India a few years ago. Look at, it's such a rich and ancient culture. It's a wonderful place to visit, and everybody's running around with their camera, taking all these pictures, and the food on their table when they're out, like, who cares? That's not connection. That's look at me. So I'm having a struggle with social media. I don't do nearly enough posting, and my book promoters are after me for that, and they should be, but I just, I don't.
I'm with you. It's funny. We went to a spiritual place in India a couple of years back, and everybody was on their phone taking pictures and selfies. I'm like, are you being spiritual? Are you getting the message?
I was on I told you I went on this 4-day wellness retreat up in Northern Ontario in late October. And one of the first stipulations was you have to leave your phone at home. Now, there's no reception up there anyway, but you have to leave it. You cannot be on your phone, because I've been at some of those types of experiences where people are sitting there the whole time, flipping through, looking for stuff. I was in a McDonald's recently to get a cup of coffee, and I looked around. The place was filled, families, little kids, big kids. mothers and fathers, nobody talking. Everybody's in their own world. There's something really disturbing about that. And I know I'm getting off the topic here, but in a way I'm not, because my book talks to that. We're not to live on autopilot and just go through day after day of, doing the same, especially as elderly people who've retired. If you don't have some means of doing something for others, that's central. I think, I talk about, if you've read my book, you know that I talk about purpose as a two-sided coin. It's on the one side, it's becoming the best version of yourself. This business of why have I got these gifts and what am I supposed to do with them? And the other side is leaving the world a better place for having been in it. And that doesn't take humongous things. It can be as small as smiling at somebody in a store. It's anything you can do to lift the energy and the atmosphere for others, especially in the chaos that we're all going through right now. It's ridiculous. We couldn't have even imagined it 3 or 4 years ago. So yeah, it does come down to how you look at life and how you look at yourself and the work you put into discovering who is that person inside me. And I talk about building on the strengths you have. You don't look at it and say, now what do I have to change? Yeah, you do that to a certain extent. But it's not the starting point. You don't go forward by looking backwards. If you were driving the car looking backwards, you'd be in a little bit of trouble. And I think it's the same. I say, look at your strengths. What are you really good at? What brings you joy? What do you really thrive on? And build on that. Extend that and use that to make the world a better place and to make yourself a better person.
And you can do that at any age.
You can do that at any age and in any stage of health. You can.
And we've already talked about that.
Yeah.
You've kind of touched on this, but how does spirituality fit into all of this?
I come from a very traditional Catholic family. So religion was, in my early childhood, in my early life, even up through my teens, the church was really the center of the community that we were part of, right? And my parents were very invested in that. And even when they didn't have money for food, the money had to go in the plate for the church, right? But the whole ethics of the religion were what gave shape to our lives. So over the years, as I've transitioned to think very differently about religion and spirituality, I talk about it as, well, I sometimes call it organic spirituality or secular spirituality, if you like. I kind of like that phrase. But by spirituality, I mean, we all have that. We know we have it. Even people who will argue that, there's nothing else. When we die, we're done, and they just throw us in the garbage heap, and that's fine. But even those people recognize that there is something mysterious within all of us as human beings, as there is in every living cell on the planet. We're not unique in having that spirit. So for me, it's that part of ourselves, that mysterious, evasive or elusive is rather not evasive, elusive part that connects us to the source of all energy, of all life. And that's where grace flows through us in the form of positive energy. I look at grace as we used to think in the old church terms of grace was a gift from God and it was somehow the thing that brought us joy. And I look on that as spirit and positive energy. So I don't know if that answers it. It's something I think a lot about, and I haven't yet found exactly the way to describe it, the way I understand it. One of my learnings right now.
I think it's one of those things that words just can't describe. Mm-hmm. And so it's somewhat difficult to kind of bring that together. It's funny, I was listening to, I think it was Alan Watts, and they've recreated all his stuff now with AI. But he was basically like, when you have reached that state, you stop trying to convince people because you realize how futile it is.
No.
And it's just not worth it. Like, when they're ready, they will come, but you learn to let go and you learn that it's just okay to be?
I'm working on something I call the Transformational Journal, which will be kind of like a workbook type of thing where I take the taking action questions from each chapter of my book and I put them into formats where people can work through that. And that to me is the process of waking up that spirituality, because that's what I think is gone. I talk about the fractured self, and by that I mean body, mind, and spirit are like, and even in the mindful movement, you'll rarely find the term spirituality used in that. They talk about the mind and the body and the connection there. But I think we're missing out when we don't go deeper. And that to me is where we open the channel. And we do that through this self-inquiry. I really think, maybe it's a trite phrase to say that many of us are living on autopilot. We just go about our rounds and we don't face or we're not curious, or we don't investigate the deeper meanings. Very few people will have a conversation like we're having right now.
I have these kinds of conversations with people a bit, but
I do too, but
that's because I find those people.
They find me.
Yes.
And I find them. Yes, you're right. But there's a huge number of people for whom that is,
It's not there. The book has been out since you released the book. Have there been some surprises in feedback or comments or conversations based on the book?
Not so much on the book. It's a really hard thing. That's why I'm doing a big publicity thing right now. What I'm getting a lot of feedback, and really interesting, wonderful feedback, is the blog I do every 2 weeks, where I take different ideas and themes from the book and write blogs about. And then I also have a newsletter where I do something on a less formal basis. And in that, I also include recipes and fun things. So, but in the blog, I'm really taken back by some of the beautiful comments, a lot of really beautiful comments. So it's been really hard to get the book out there. There's just so much stuff. Everybody can write a book now, right?
Yes.
Amazon has a chokehold on it, and they get thousands of books every month. So if you know my book and you know the name of it and you know my name, you can find it. But if you just go on and do a search for something on spirituality or aging or whatever, it'll be just thrown in as one of many. So I do what I can. But I think that the message from the blogs is giving me a lot of encouragement. And especially, like, I do a variety of things. I do some very I don't just do all, more philosophic or religious. I don't mean it to be religious, because I don't intend that for it to be. It's a secular book. But I do a lot of very practical things, and I do in my book. I think you will see that. I have a lot of information. I think understanding, and that's why the first part, the book is 3 parts. The first part is really the background information. And you have to understand what you're doing. And that's where I talk about reimagining aging, reimagining health, finding purpose. Those when you understand what that means, what it means to find fulfillment. And that's not, I did a blog recently called Ditch the Bucket List, because it's not about just having experiences. You can be incapacitated, like we talked about Hawkins, and still have wonderful experiences. So it's about the depth you live in.
Yeah, I think people don't realize writing the book is 20% of the work. Promoting the book is 80% of the work.
I would say more. No.
And that's the reality of it.
Yeah. This book was a long time in the writing, because I was also, when I've written books before, stuff for education, I knew it was stuff that I had talked about to many audiences, and I'd worked with teachers and children and stuff. This is something I'm living. And so my blog is. Every blog I write is something I have been encountering recently. So when I take a topic, it's coming out of lived experience. And I think that's why it's resonating with people. And
Well,
it's interesting though, years back, if you wrote an article for a magazine, it might be 1,500 words, even 2,000. Now, oh my God, you mustn't go over 900 words. Nobody will
that
read it.
is not true at all. That is not true. People who are interested will read it. Long form content works.
Yeah.
It does. Don't listen to the people who are writing for the people who are going to read your type of material will read a longer content.
Yes. Yeah.
It's just the reality.
Yeah. And I'm very realistic about that. I never expected huge audiences, but I wanted to support people and have them not have to go through as much frustration as I did trying to find this path, because, I really had to investigate a lot of stuff. I did a ton of reading of research of people who are known in this business. And there's a handful that I gravitated to and that I keep close to me on my bookshelf. There's a lot of them that just have a lot of words on their pages, but you don't get a sense that their heart is in there or their soul.
And that does happen a lot in the world of book publishing. If you want to reach the younger crowd, try YouTube.
Right. Chat GPT, right?
Yes.
Brian Holiday just did a really great article on the fallacy of ChatGPT. I loved it. I ran it off and I read it several times.
I will have to check that out. I've read a lot of his work. I don't
He's
know that I saw that.
He's done a nice article on that. The other thing I wanted to mention, because it's fresh in my mind, you know who David Brooks is on PBS. He's on PBS and he's a political commentator, and he writes for the New York Times and the Atlantic and different. But anyway, he did an interesting interview where he's talking about spirituality and the difference between religion and spirituality. And he's arguing on the side of religion, where I look at it the other way. And his argument, which is good and it's valid, because he said with spirituality, it can be very airy-fairy. But he said with religion, you have a framework, you have a system of actionable things, where with spirituality, it's more airy-fairy. So anyway, I found that interesting because I love David Brooks. I think he's really interesting. I've been following him on PBS for years.
The reality is people want to be told what to do. And so that's what it is. They don't want to think, and that is unfortunate.
But I am surprised because everywhere I go, I meet people and we talk about this. I said earlier, that I didn't think there were that many people, but I do. I meet people all the time for whom my message resonates. And I think that there is a real awakening among us, that there is something deeper and there is something more meaningful, and there is a way for us to come through the chaos. And I really do believe that the destruction of all of the things that gave our life structure, the church, politics, healthcare, education, they're all crumbling. Who do we look to? And I think that has a very definite purpose in reshaping the world. And it needs it. When you think of people like you and I'm sure you're the same. I mean, we can go to the grocery store and we can buy anything we want to buy. It's all there. And we can, we have the money if we need to do this or that. And yet, the vast majority of people on the planet are happy to have a handful of rice for a meal. So something has to happen. The divisiveness, the hatred, we've got to get a force going among those of us who have that gift of being able to understand what's important. We've got to bring that energy up.
We are coming to the end of a cycle.
Yes.
And this is just how the cycle ends, and it will begin anew in very much the way that you talk about. So I think the youngest are starting to revolt against the phones, and they want to get back to in-person, real life. And so it's shifting. Things don't always move as fast as I want them to, though.
Yeah.
It'll take a little while, but it will definitely get there.
Well, I'm not looking at much longer for the cycle to go around, but I do my little part now. I call this my legacy.
What's one truth about success you wish more people understood?
That success is who you are, not what you have or what titles you might have.
That's very true. And a lot of people find out, and that's kind of what I talked about with that article that just came out in the Wall Street Journal. The moment you retire, you're forgotten. All those things vanish. And if you built your life on that, it just disappeared. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
Without a question, for me, it's not giving people outside myself the power to define who I am. I wish that I had understood that the only person that matters in that conversation is me.
And that is very, very true. Don't let someone else define you.
Tell you what you
have
can't do. I've had that for my whole life. And at the risk of sounding sexist, I will say, being a woman in education, which is primarily women teachers in elementary education, men had all the say. We did the work. We were the thinkers. We were the visionaries, and they took the credit and got the big bucks. I wish I'd known that when I was much younger.
I very much can see that. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Believe in yourself. Believe in yourself, and the part of that I think, I don't want to be too long. I know you told me short. No, I can't formulate it. But it is that understanding that you have the power, that you don't find success and you don't fulfill your life by sitting waiting for somebody else to hand it to you either. That it's about doing all you can to support yourself. And then I guess what I will just end it with is something that is a mantra of mine that I have used through the whole writing process. Trust the journey.
Enjoy the journey.
Enjoy the journey. Yes. If you trust it, you will enjoy it. That you're not in this alone. We've got this, we're so afraid to talk about any kind of God or somebody directing our lives or all of that. But there is somehow a wisdom in this universal source of energy that directs us. And the more we do to help ourselves, the more it comes back to support us.
Very, very true. If people would like to learn more about you in the book, how do they do that?
Well, it is on Amazon, and it's also available in Friesen Press. My website, if you're interested in the book or in what I say in the book and how I elaborate through my blogs, my website is Susanne Eden, SUSANNE, Eden, EDEN, .com. We also now have put up some links to some of these interviews and podcasts, and also to some of the articles. And I've done my first video in a series I'm doing called Chatting with Susanne. And it's a very informal chat I had with a very close friend who's in her last days with stage 4 cancer. She's a little bit younger than me, not much. We've known each other since we were young teachers, and it's on the final journey. And she expresses so eloquently and with such hope what she's been facing, how she's come through it, and what she imagines. So that's the first one in that. And those are all on my website.
And we'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Rocky.
Hey, thanks for checking out the full unedited video of the Richer Soul podcast. You can get the full audio podcast with intro, outro, and a ton more details here on YouTube or whatever your favorite podcast player is. Don't forget, we've got hundreds of episodes for you to go back through, and you can also get episode information on the Richer Soul website as well. Don't forget to subscribe so you're automatically updated as to what's going on and every time we release a new episode. The first few episodes of the Richer Soul podcast actually lay out the entire framework that everything is built on over all of these years. So check them out as well. Thanks for listening.